The camera flashes faded, replaced by the softer whir of lights being repositioned. Maye Musk stood near the backdrop, still in her floor-length silver gown, her makeup flawless, hair pinned in perfect waves. The crew buzzed around her, prepping for the next look. She took a sip of water and glanced toward the edge of the studio, where a figure moved slowly across the floor, bent slightly at the waist, pushing a mop. At first, Maye thought nothing of it. People came and went during shoots, stylists, assistants, caterers. But something about the woman's movement made her pause. The rhythm of the hands, the limp in her left leg, the way she paused every few steps to catch her breath. There was a familiarity to it. A memory not fully formed yet impossibly present. Maye tilted her head slightly. The woman's uniform was navy blue and hung loose on her frame. Her white curls were pulled back in a bun, but strands had fallen loose, framing a face lined by time. She wiped at a stubborn spot with quiet focus, her wrist turning inward as she worked, an old gesture, delicate yet determined. Maye blinked. No. It couldn't be. The woman looked up briefly, adjusting her mop handle, and for a split second their eyes met across the room. Maye felt her breath catch. That face. Older. Yes. Tired. Yes. But those eyes, those steady, knowing eyes, had once looked at her children the same way, full of quiet command and infinite patience. She handed her water bottle to a nearby assistant without a word and walked toward the woman, heels clicking softly against the concrete floor. The makeup artist called her name, but Maye didn't turn. She moved carefully, slowly, as if approaching something fragile that might break if startled. When she reached the woman, she hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Excuse me," Maye said, her voice low but clear. "Is your name Ruby?" The woman straightened slightly, hand tightening on the mop. Her eyes narrowed in confusion, then widened with something deeper. Recognition. "Miss Maye." The words trembled in the air between them. Maye took a step closer, her heart pounding louder than any runway music. "Ruby," she said again, softer this time. "Is it really you?" Ruby's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. She reached up with one worn hand, hovering near Maye's face, not quite touching. Then she dropped it, her shoulders pulling back with practiced composure. You look like a queen," Ruby said finally, her accent still as thick and lilting as Maye remembered. "I saw your picture once on a magazine cover in the laundromat. I didn't believe it was really you." "It is me," Maye said. "And I never stopped thinking about you." There was a silence that settled between them, heavy with years and things unsaid. The bright studio lights continued to glow, bouncing off the mirrors and makeup palettes and designer fabric. But in that corner of the room, there was only one thing Maye could see: the woman who had once watched over her children while she worked night shifts, who had bandaged scraped knees and whispered lullabies in 3 languages, who had left without warning and never came back. "What are you doing here?" Maye asked, though the question felt inadequate. Ruby glanced down at her mop and shrugged lightly. "Just trying to stay busy. Rent doesn't pay itself. I clean a few studios, some offices. Keeps me moving." "You're 85, Maye said quietly. 86 next spring," Ruby replied. "God willing." Maye reached for her hand then, gently. It was rough, dry, the knuckles slightly swollen from years of scrubbing and lifting. Ruby didn't pull away. "Would you let me take you to lunch?" Maye asked. "I have a break soon. We can talk." Ruby hesitated. "I have 2 more rooms to finish. But maybe I can take 30 minutes. "I'll wait," Maye said. As she stepped back, returning to her place on set, Maye felt the floor shift beneath her, not physically, but in the way memory folds time. She was no longer the elegant woman in heels and diamonds. For a moment, she was 32 again, juggling clients, bills, and children, hoping the electricity wouldn't get cut off again. And Ruby was the one person who never let her fall apart completely. Maye turned back once before the shoot resumed. Ruby had returned to mopping, but her movements were slower now, more deliberate. And Maye saw it clearly, the way her left hand trembled slightly, the way her back arched from years of strain. She had once saved Maye's family from falling. And now, Maye thought, maybe it was time to return the favor. The shoot had ended hours ago, and the city outside was beginning to settle into evening. Maye sat at a corner table in a quiet cafe just 2 blocks from the studio, still wearing her elegant coat but no longer feeling quite so tall in it. Across from her sat Ruby, wrapped in a plain brown cardigan that looked 2 sizes too big. Her fingers curled carefully around a mug of rooibos tea, the steam rising softly between them. They had barely touched their food. The conversation hadn't needed much prompting. Once Ruby began to speak, the years folded in like pages turning backward. Maye listened, her heart caught between gratitude and guilt, each word peeling away another layer of memory she hadn't realized she had buried. "You remember how little Elon used to hide under the kitchen table when the other boys teased him?" Ruby said with a small smile. "He always had that faraway look in his eyes, like he was trying to solve something bigger than the world around him." "He still does," Maye said, her voice catching. Ruby nodded. One afternoon, he came home with his shirt torn and his glasses broken. Wouldn't talk to anyone. I made him some warm milk with cinnamon, sat beside him on the floor, and started humming that old song. "You know the one. Thula Barber." Maye closed her eyes. "I had forgotten that. But now I can hear it again. The way you sang it, like a secret being passed from one heart to another." "He stopped crying after the second verse," Ruby said quietly. "I told him he wasn't strange. Just early. Some children arrive at their future before anyone else understands it." Maye blinked, overwhelmed by the image of her son at 6 years old, cradled in the care of this woman who had never demanded thanks or recognition. "And Kimball?" she asked. "Do you remember how he used to bring you notes?" "Still have one in a box somewhere," Ruby replied, her eyes twinkling. "Dear Miss Ruby, you are my best cooker." Misspelled and all. They laughed gently together, and Maye could almost see her little boy again, face smeared with peanut butter, holding out crayon-covered declarations of love. "And Tosca," Maye added, always trying to be older than her brothers. "She followed you around like a shadow." "She used to pretend she was my assistant," Ruby said. "Carried a little notebook and everything. Said she wanted to open a business where we both made soup and told stories." "You know," Maye said, "she's a filmmaker now. She tells stories for a living." Ruby smiled. "Then she followed the dream. That's more than most people get to do." Maye looked down at her tea, her fingers tightening around the cup. "There was one night I remember vividly. I came home from my 3rd shift, blood sugar low, legs numb, and I passed out in the doorway. You pulled me in. You boiled oats, got the kids to bed, and stayed until morning. I never thanked you." "You didn't need to," Ruby said. "That's what we do for people we love. No one keeps score." "But I should have," Maye whispered. Ruby waved a hand lightly in the air, brushing away the sentiment like dust. "Those were hard times. You did what you had to do. 5 jobs," Maye murmured. "I didn't know what exhaustion was until then." "And yet, you did it," Ruby said. "You kept going. I was just there to help hold the line." Maye hesitated, then asked the question that had haunted her for decades. "Why did you leave?" Ruby didn't answer right away. She folded her hands in her lap and stared at the window, where the neon reflection of a diner sign flickered in the glass. "I wanted to stay," she said finally. "I had planned to. I even packed lunchboxes for the next day. But sometimes life decides for you." "Did something happen?" Ruby shook her head slowly. "Just one of those things. I woke up that morning, looked around, and knew it was time. But no goodbye." Maye's voice broke slightly. Ruby looked back at her, eyes soft but resolute. "It would have been too hard. I wasn't sure I could walk away if Elon asked me to stay. Or if Tosca cried. And you needed strength, not more chaos. I thought something had happened to you," Maye said. "For weeks, I kept waiting. My children asked where you were every day. I had no answer." "That's the price of disappearing quietly," Ruby replied. "No closure, just absence." A long silence stretched between them. Outside, a bus rumbled past, and the light from passing cars danced across the table. "You raised my children," Maye said finally, her voice barely more than a breath. "You loved them like your own." "I did," Ruby said. "And I still do." Maye reached across the table and took Ruby's hand in both of hers. It trembled slightly, but Ruby didn't pull away. "Then let me do something for you now," Maye said. "Let me be the one to hold the line." Ruby didn't answer. She just sat quietly, eyes glistening, as if searching for a part of herself she had long ago given away. 3 days after their quiet lunch, Maye sat in a corner office lined with glass and wood, her fingers laced tightly in her lap. Across from her sat an old friend and legal advisor, Judith Neal, flipping through a manila folder. The room smelled of lemon oil and something older, memory, perhaps. Outside, the Manhattan skyline buzzed, oblivious. Judith looked up, her expression unreadable. "You were right to ask," she said gently. "There is a file. Sealed, but not completely buried." Maye leaned forward. "Tell me everything." Judith pulled out a faded police report and laid it on the table. June 14, 1982. Anonymous call placed to the Pretoria Central Precinct. Domestic disturbance. Caller requested officers check on a woman and 3 children at a residential address in Waterkloof. Officers arrived. Found no injuries, but noted extreme emotional distress in both the woman and the eldest child. Maye's throat tightened. Elon would have been 10. Judith continued, flipping pages. The caller didn't leave a name, but the origin was traced later to a payphone 2 blocks from your house. Cross-referenced with a separate internal HR memo from your husband's office. A termination request, initiated the same day, for a Miss Ruby Mbatha. Grounds: breach of trust and interference in private affairs. Maye's hands slowly unclenched. It was her. She was the one who called. Judith nodded. The memo went further. It recommended blacklisting her from childcare agencies across Gauteng province. The language was careful, legal, but it essentially ensured she wouldn't be hired again in any home that used their network. "And I didn't know," Maye whispered. "I didn't know any of this." "Your husband was thorough," Judith said delicately, "and influential." Maye stared at the papers. Each line seemed to vibrate with quiet betrayal. She imagined Ruby, standing at that payphone, hands shaking, voice low. Imagined her watching the patrol car roll up, praying she hadn't made things worse. Then being handed a dismissal.
"No goodbyes. No recourse."
"What about my mother?" Maye asked suddenly. "She was living with us at the time." Judith hesitated, then pulled another document from the folder. A financial record. Transfer dated 3 days later. From your mother's private account to Ruby Mbatha. 10,000 rand. Marked personal assistance for relocation. Maye sat back, stunned. "She paid her off," she said flatly. "To disappear. Or to protect you," Judith replied. Back then, scandal could destroy everything. She may have believed she was saving your career, your children, your future. But she let Ruby take the fall, Maye said. She let the only person who helped us be erased. Judith placed a gentle hand on Maye's wrist. She made a choice. Now you get to make yours. That night, Maye didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, the documents spread across the coverlet like pieces of a puzzle she had avoided solving for 40 years. Outside, the wind knocked softly against the windowpane, as if the past itself were asking to be let in. She thought about the day she had woken up, bruised and ashamed, to find her children already dressed, oatmeal cooling on the table, and Ruby quietly sweeping crumbs from the floor. She had assumed the woman simply had a gift for endurance, never knowing she had stayed up all night, waiting for the sounds of sirens that she herself had summoned. Maye remembered her own confusion when Ruby was gone. The empty room. The toys stacked neatly. The dishes done. As if Ruby had been trying to leave without leaving a trace. She never said goodbye, Maye whispered aloud. Not because she didn't care, but because someone made sure she couldn't. The next morning, Maye flew to Cape Town without warning. She knocked on her mother's door before the sun had risen. The older woman answered in a robe, her silver hair loosely pinned, eyes sharp even through surprise. Maye stepped inside without a word and laid the documents on the dining table. Her mother sat slowly, studying the papers in silence. When she looked up, her face was pale but composed. "Yes," she said quietly. I paid her. It wasn't hush money. It was a thank you. And a goodbye. You let her carry the weight of everything, May said. She was blacklisted. Homeless. Alone. I didn't know that, her mother said. I thought she'd find a new place. Start fresh. You thought wrong. Her mother didn't flinch. You were hanging by a thread. I couldn't risk losing control of the situation. The press, the church, your clients. They'd have crucified you. Or taken the children. So you erased the only person who didn't. The two women stared at each other, decades of choices rising between them like smoke. She was more than a nanny, May said finally. She saved my children's sense of safety. She sang to them when I couldn't. She made sure there was always light in the room, even when we had no electricity. Her mother's voice trembled for the first time. I didn't know what else to do. May gathered the papers, sliding them back into the folder. Then let me be the one to do it now. The right thing. She left without closing the door behind her. The wind picked up outside, rustling the leaves of the jacaranda tree near the gate. As she stepped into the car, May felt a quiet clarity settle into her chest. Ruby had vanished that night not because she chose to walk away, but because the world decided she didn't matter. And that was about to change. The snow had begun to fall again by the time May stepped onto the porch of her childhood home in Regina. The wind was sharp, the kind that reminded her why she had once dreamed of desert climates and open skies. Still, there was something about the creak of this old wooden step, the shape of the mailbox, even the faint scent of pine from the trees lining the yard. It all made the memories come faster than she expected. Her mother opened the door before she knocked. As if she'd been watching. Or waiting. They sat in the parlor without tea, without the usual pleasantries. The folder lay unopened between them on the table, its weight unspoken but deeply felt. Why didn't you tell me? May asked, her voice steady but without accusation. Her mother sighed and looked down at her hands, folded neatly in her lap. You had just begun to stand, May. Really stand. I thought if Ruby stayed, it would all come crashing down. You were finally gaining clients. The children had structure. Any noise, any scandal, and it could have ended everything. So you asked her to leave. I begged her, her mother said softly. I told her I was afraid. That if anyone discovered what had happened in that house, what he had done to you, what the neighbors suspected, it would define your entire life. And hers. May stared at her. She would have stayed, even after all of it. That's what scared me most, her mother whispered. That she loved you and the children enough to stay. I was afraid of what she might eventually say. Or do. So I gave her the money. I told her she had to disappear, for your sake. You knew she was innocent. And you let them brand her a thief. Her mother flinched. That wasn't me. That was your husband's people. They handled the fallout. I thought the payment would keep her safe. Give her a chance to start over. But it didn't. She was blacklisted. She couldn't work with children again. Her name was on a list, risky hire. They accused her of theft. She never had a chance. Her mother covered her mouth with her hand, the tremor visible. I didn't know. I didn't check. I told myself it wasn't my place anymore. That you needed silence more than the truth. May stood and walked to the window, watching the snow melt on the pane. Outside, two neighborhood boys pulled a sled across the icy street, laughing as they nearly toppled. She watched them for a moment, thinking of her own children, Elon, Kimball, Tosca, each of them shaped, however quietly, by the woman her mother had erased. Ruby kept a journal, she said without turning around. She never told anyone, but she wrote about us. There's a line from it I can't forget. She walked back to the table and opened the folder, removing a thin photocopy Judith had included. May unfolded it carefully and slid it across the wood. I chose to carry the blame, the page read in neat, looping script, so that 3 children could grow up without fear. I do not regret it. Love is not always loud. Her mother read the words silently, her face slowly collapsing inward. A tear slipped down her cheek, unnoticed. May let it fall. Some truths were meant to sting. She lost her livelihood, May said. Her home. She worked cleaning buildings and pushing carts through warehouses. All because we let a lie stand. A lie we benefited from. I didn't know, her mother said again, but the words rang hollow now. May took a deep breath, as if trying to clear the cold from her lungs. You always told me that dignity was a woman's shield. That even when we had no money, we had pride. Yes. But we borrowed that shield from her. And never gave it back. Her mother looked at her daughter then, really looked. Not as a model. Not as the public figure. But as the girl who once came home bruised, holding her baby close, with no words to explain what had happened. And she said, quietly, "You're right." May gathered the papers, slipped them into her bag, and stood. "I'm going to restore her name," she said. "Not just for her. For all the women who carried children that weren't theirs, and wounds they never showed." Her mother nodded once. And May saw the faintest shift in her eyes. Regret, maybe. Or relief. As May stepped outside, the snow had quieted. The sky was still grey, but the air felt different, less heavy somehow. She paused on the porch, looking back at the house that held so many silences, then walked down the steps with a calm she hadn't felt in days. Ruby had written those words in a journal no one was ever meant to read. And yet, they had found their way to her. Quietly. Just like Ruby herself. Love is not always loud. But it lasts. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach and old fabric softener. The building was one of those low-rise complexes on the edge of the city, too forgotten to be cared for, too inhabited to be torn down. May climbed the narrow staircase slowly, her heels quiet on the worn linoleum, each step echoing with hesitation. At the third-floor landing, she paused. Apartment 3C. A paper butterfly was taped to the door. Faded. Carefully cut. It looked like something a child might have made decades ago. She knocked gently. A moment later, the door creaked open. Ruby appeared, a towel over one shoulder and a bottle of window cleaner still in her hand. Her eyes lit up for a second, then narrowed in polite confusion. "May," she said, surprised. "I wasn't expecting company. Can I come in?" Ruby hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was modest but clean. Too clean. Every surface wiped down, every book aligned. There were no photos on the walls. No clutter. Just order and silence. "You caught me on laundry day," Ruby said, trying to smile. She gestured toward a kettle on the stove. "I can make tea." "Not today," May said gently. "I came for something else." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside it was a formal letter, embossed with gold trim. A printed offer. Accompanied by a contract. And a handwritten note on ivory paper, in May's own cursive. "I've arranged for a place near me in New York. Full-time care if needed. A salary. Not charity. Honor. You'd be my guest. And more than that, Ruby, you'd be part of my life again." Ruby stood very still. Her hands didn't reach for the papers. She stared at them as if they might burn her fingers. "I don't understand," she said. "You gave up everything," May said quietly. "And I let it happen. It's long overdue." Ruby shook her head. "I clean studios and buildings, yes. But I still choose when I wake, when I sleep, how I live. You want to give me comfort, and I respect that. But you see me now as something I'm not." "What do you mean?" Ruby's voice didn't rise, but it hardened. "I don't want to be a story, May. A before and after photo for people who follow you. A caption under some filtered post, 'She helped raise Elon Musk.' No. That's not who I am. You think I would reduce you like that? Not on purpose. But that world of yours, May, it turns people into symbols. I won't be pitted in designer light. This isn't pity." Ruby stepped away from the table. Her shoulders were squared now, her back straight despite the ache May knew lived there. "You want to know why I stayed with you so long? Why I sang to your children and read to them and carried groceries up those endless stairs? Of course I do. Because I believed in them. In you. In that tiny flame you kept alive when everything around you was falling apart. I didn't do it hoping to be remembered. I did it so that one day, those children would grow up safe. And they did. Maye stood in silence. The papers in her hand felt heavier now. Not because Ruby had rejected the offer, but because her words had returned something Maye hadn't expected, a mirror. "You're proud," Maye said softly. "Wouldn't you be?" Ruby replied. "I walked through fire and came out the other side. I may have been pushed down, but I was never broken." Maye took a breath, let it settle. "Then is there anything I can do?" Ruby looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, without bitterness, "Just don't rewrite the story to make yourself the hero. That's all I ask." Maye nodded. The pages in her hand trembled slightly. She folded them back into the envelope and placed it gently on the table. "I won't. I promise." Ruby gave a small nod. Then she turned, walked back to the window, and resumed wiping the glass, her movements calm and precise. Maye watched her for a moment longer, then turned and left. As the door closed behind her, a gust of wind caught in the hallway, lifting the corners of a discarded newspaper. Maye didn't look back. Some debts, she realized, are not meant to be paid. Only honored. The old building on 42nd and Willow had once been a daycare, then a community center, then nothing at all. Its windows were boarded, its walls tagged with graffiti, and the garden out front had long been replaced by gravel and broken bottles. But when Maye stood in front of it that morning, wrapped in a wool coat against the wind, she didn't see what it had become. She saw what it could hold. The renovation took 4 months. She hired architects who understood light and space, but more importantly, memory. The peeling walls were replaced with soft earth tones and warm wood. A reading room opened onto a garden filled with native plants. A mural was painted near the entry, women of every age, culture, and shape holding hands in a circle, their silhouettes rising like mountains. They called it House of Grace. Maye refused to give interviews until the day it opened. She wanted the story to begin not with her but with the people it was built for. On opening day, the press arrived early. Reporters, influencers, foundation donors, curious neighbors. Maye greeted them all in a simple navy dress, no jewelry but a silver pin shaped like a key. At noon, she stood at the podium in front of the building, the wind tugging gently at her scarf. "This place," she began, "was not created to erase the past. It was built to honor it. We have always relied on the quiet strength of women who clean, who care, who stay when others leave. Their names rarely appear in history books, but they shape futures every day." She paused, scanning the crowd. "Today, I want to introduce you to someone who shaped mine." The doors behind her opened. A hush spread through the crowd as Ruby stepped forward. She wore a tailored grey coat, her hair wrapped in a soft scarf the color of plum. Her posture was upright, her steps careful but sure. She carried no papers, no notes. Just the gravity of someone who had spent a lifetime being overlooked, and was now being truly seen. "This," Maye continued, "is Ruby Mbatha. She is the founding director of House of Grace. And she is the reason I'm standing here today." There was silence. Then a wave of applause. Maye stepped aside, and Ruby took the microphone. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice did not. "I never expected this," she said. "Not the building. Not the title. Not the cameras. Most of my life, I worked in silence. I cleaned other people's messes. I watched children grow who would one day forget my name." She looked out at the faces gathered, her eyes steady. "But here's what I've learned. Love leaves a mark. Even if no one sees it at first. Even if it's swept away, painted over, or erased." She paused. "When I was asked to direct this house, I almost said no. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I didn't want to be put on display. I didn't want my story turned into someone else's redemption." She turned toward Maye, a quiet smile passing between them. "But then I realized, this wasn't about me. It was about the women like me. The ones who raised children they didn't birth. Who stayed through the storms. Who gave more than they had." She stepped back, and the crowd rose to their feet. The applause was longer this time, deeper, carrying something more than ceremony. It carried acknowledgement. Later that afternoon, a journalist from The Guardian published a headline that would circle the world by evening. She cleaned floors at 85. But once, she cleaned fear from the lives of the Musk children. Inside House of Grace, Ruby moved quietly through the halls, stopping to adjust a book on a shelf, to greet an elderly woman who had just signed up to mentor a young mother. A small girl clung to her grandmother's leg and waved up at her. Ruby waved back. May watched from the side, her eyes misting not from pride, but from a kind of awe. She had tried to repay a debt, but what Ruby gave back was larger than any gesture. It was legacy. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Ruby stood by the front gate. The mural behind her glowed in the last light. Her silhouette stood among those painted figures, now one of them, now all of them. May joined her. "You were right," Ruby said softly. "Love isn't always loud. But sometimes, when it's ready, it speaks. And when it does," May replied, "the world finally listens." The call came on a grey Tuesday morning. The kind of morning when the sky feels like it's holding its breath. May was preparing to leave for a speaking engagement when her phone buzzed. The voice on the other end was soft but clear. Ruby had passed in her sleep. No pain. No struggle. Just a quiet breath that didn't return. The world didn't stop. Traffic kept moving, emails kept arriving. But for May, something immense had shifted. Not an ending. A closing. Like the last page of a book you never wanted to finish. The memorial was held at House of Grace, under the mural Ruby had once paused to admire. People came from everywhere. Women who had worked with her in warehouses. Children she had once sung to, now grown. Neighbors, journalists, teachers. Each carried a story. Each one quietly marked by her. Tosca flew in from Cape Town. Kimball arrived with his children, one of whom carried a paper butterfly Ruby had made for him on his 3rd birthday. And Elon, ever the hardest to read, sent a video. He couldn't be there in person, he never liked funerals, but what he recorded made the room fall still. He appeared on screen without ceremony. No tie, just a simple shirt, his hair a little messy. He looked into the camera for a long second before speaking. "She was the first person," he said, "who told me I was smart. Not weird. That I wasn't broken. Just different. And that different could be beautiful. No one had ever said that to me before. I used to hide in the corners of the house and build things with wires and batteries, and she would crouch beside me, watch for a minute, and then say, 'There's something in you, little one.' Like thunder, waiting. I never forgot that." He paused. "I owe a lot of who I am to her. But even more, I owe her for the way she saw us. With love. Quiet love. Fierce love. The kind that never asks for applause." The video ended. No music. Just silence. The kind that wraps around a room when truth has been spoken. After the ceremony, one of Ruby's old neighbors approached May with a small wooden box. She said Ruby had left it with her for safekeeping, with instructions to give it to May if something happened. Inside was a single folded letter, yellowed slightly at the edges. Unsent. Unopened. May sat alone in the garden and read it slowly. "Dear May, there were times in my life when I believed I didn't matter. That I was just hands. Just labor. Just a shadow moving quietly through other people's lives. I told myself my love was too quiet to leave a mark. But when I saw you standing on that stage, when I heard your voice speak my name, not with pity but with pride, I realized something. Kindness does not disappear. Even when it's forgotten for a while. Even when no one says thank you. Love that is true finds its way back. I used to think the world would never remember me. But I was wrong. You remembered. Your children remembered. And that was enough. Thank you. For seeing me. For returning. With love always, Ruby May pressed the letter to her chest. It was not just a farewell. It was a redemption sealed in ink and memory. Weeks later, May had the letter framed. It hangs now at the entrance of House of Grace, behind a glass panel, under soft lighting. Beneath it, engraved in brushed bronze, are the words May chose carefully, words that had lived inside her long before she found the courage to speak them aloud. For the women who once saved a child through kindness the world never noticed. Visitors pause when they read it. Some cry. Some smile. Some just stand in silence, their thoughts drifting to a face, a name, a moment from their own past. May visits often. She walks the halls, speaks with the women, listens to the stories. She doesn't bring photographers. She doesn't need to. This isn't about image. It's about a promise kept. In a world that applauds noise, Ruby had lived a life of quiet power. She had lifted others with hands that were cracked but steady. She had taught 3 children that safety could come in the form of a lullaby, and 1 woman that debts of love are best repaid not in gifts, but in legacy. And in the hush of that final letter, May found not just closure, but a beginning. The House of Grace had its name. Now, it had its soul.